Hey everyone out there in our YouTube community. Today I'm unlocking one of the most essential workshops from my healing program called Getting Ready to Heal. If healing feels overwhelming or you can't understand where to start or why you're still feeling stuck, this workshop takes on some of the hidden barriers and how to begin moving forward.
You've all read this, you've read this on bumper stickers and posters, but this time during the Q&A, we've got to view healing not as a destination. I want to fall in love again, and I want to be clear of all of this, and I don't want to think about the narcissist anymore. Great. Those are goals. Goals are different than healing. Healing is the day-to-day work. Today begins the single step. And I want you to think of it that way. You've committed to this, you're in it. This is one step of thousands you're going to take. All right. Start now. Toss it in the chat. I actually should have put little numbers under those faces. Maybe the angry man, angry person, angry whatever that is, could get the one all the way up to the happy green. I would like you to think in terms of how you're feeling, and you can share some of this in the chat. How are you feeling? Give us that. We'll do that next month. How are you feeling? But then I want you to think about this. You can think about it. You could write about it. You can month in your life. Then I'd love you to share in the chat maybe the best thing that happened to you this month, and then the worst thing that happened to you this month. Always optional. None of the sharing stuff is required, but I think that bit of sharing, sometimes when we do that there's a whole research area on cultivating gratitude. When we think about the best thing that happened this month, it does let us know that we're actually at least excavating the good stuff that's happening in our lives. And then I think we're going to be real quick at being able to figure out what the worst thing that happens as a group. The next thing I want you to do, and this is personal, again, would love to see you sort of share this in the chat amongst yourselves. You don't have to, is where you're at. Okay. There's a range of places people are at, and this healing program is designed to work with all of you. There are the people, there's some of you who are out. You're out of the majority of your significant narcissistic relationships, or there was one really impactful relationship. Maybe it was a long-term committed relationship. Maybe it was a family relationship. Maybe it was a work relationship, but you're already out of it and you're content. I do hope we have some of you in our midst today and in this program, frankly, because I do think that healing is an ongoing journey. And there's also sometimes a risk of people say, I'm out of all the relationships. Everything should be fine now. But just because we're out of it physically, we're no longer married or living with someone, doesn't mean that they're not living on in our heads. But that's one group. Second group, you're already out, maybe again, out of the relationship, but you're still really spending a fair amount of time in ruminating. The out and confused group are the people who are already out, but are still ruminating about the relationship. You're thinking about it. The next group is the people who understand narcissism and they're getting out. You're saying, okay, I get this now. And now I know I need to start thinking about what I need to do. And getting out doesn't always mean getting a divorce or going no contact. It may mean I'm setting boundaries. I'm not showing up for Sunday dinner every week. In my head, this marriage may be over, but I'm physically showing up because of custody issues. Remember, out doesn't always mean out. It may mean mentally out. But you're getting really ready to do that in a meaningful way. I've got my group who get it and staying in, like you're fully going to stay in, like you're going to continue going to Sunday dinner, but you're saying, I get it. I get that my parent is always going to be toxic. I get that my sibling's always going to monopolize things. I understand that my partner's always going to be a cheater, and I'm planning on staying in this relationship. Okay. There's more of you than you think. Are you in that group? Then there's the group that's confused and stuck. That's the group that you don't quite get it, but you also don't know what to do. So you're saying like, okay, I don't understand what is happening. Who is this person? What is happening to me? What is gaslighting? And you don't know what to do. I hope there's some of you in this group, because this would be great for you. It might actually push fast forward, but the people in this group, the confused and stuck group, may not even know this is a thing, and probably a program like this would just go over most people's head. And then there's the folks who are fully in and don't think there's a problem. If there's any of you here, I would be really surprised. You probably just wandered into the wrong bar, but that's okay, because welcome. We're gonna set you straight. So, but I have a feeling we're gonna see a lot of you in the green, the purple, the light green, and the yellow, couple of people in that black group, in that black bar, and then very, very few in the red bar. But share in the chat which one of these you month. What will happen in this program is lots of things. You're going to get education, and obviously you already get a lot of this on YouTube. One thing my team will be doing is actually taking this. YouTube right now to me feels like this basement with a lot of really great stuff in it, but it's super disorganized. By being in this healing program, we're attempting to actually get some of this organized for you so that when you need something, it'll be a lot easier to pull the book from the shelf. So that's something that's in process. The community platform is a way for you to talk and interact and hear about the stories of people who are going through narcissistic relationships themselves. This is going to be an opportunity to share resources, things that we've come across, articles we come across, books we come across, films, videos, you name it. Also for any of you, if there's a resource you say, wow, this was a useful article, it's a place to share those resources and receive resources. Daily practices and reflection are more educational. Healing requires daily practice, daily reflection. That's where the journey's coming. I really have as a goal for everyone to end the cycle of self-blame. It's not just about the relationship you're in, it's about all the future ones. It's not just the moment. There's that empathic moment we all have in a relationship where we say, am I responsible? Like, is this partly my fault? Okay, I'll give you that for a minute. And then you critically assess it and say, no, I actually followed up. I communicated clearly. I'm clear that I did my part. Then you can let it go. The challenge with narcissistic abuse is the self-blame lingers for a lifetime. Those are the cycles we want to end by teaching you most of the toxic patterns, if not all of them, are emanating from the narcissistic individual. We'll be talking about self-compassion every single day, going to that place of self-kindness, self-forgiveness, understanding that there's other people who are going through this with you, and to really retain that mindfulness instead of going on that anxious spree forward or that rumination backwards. And then you know how the Rumi line goes, right? The wound is where the light enters you. I think that's great. I live and die by that quote. But I'd love to do sort of take that Rumi quote and take it a step further and help you learn how to take that light that entered through the wound and put it back out there. Pay it forward in whatever way you can, not just to other people, but to yourself. For a lot of you, your potential, your power has really, really been restricted by these relationships. For some of you during adulthood, for some of you for your entire lives. The world is missing out on your contributions. And so I feel like all of you learning that your light needs to go back into the world is a really important part of this program. So I'm not going to belabor this. This is something you can be doing at the same time. I'm talking about your journals and notes, thinking about these most difficult people. Journal prompts this week. What made it difficult? What was the type of relationship? Grandiose, communal, etc. How do you feel about it? How long it's been? What has worked in terms of staying sane in this relationship? For some of you, it might have been like pretending the noise coming out of their mouth was mah, 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 mah. Like that might be all that would work. What hasn't worked? That's going to be a longer list. And what are the barriers to change? This is really important. I feel like this is like I'm giving you a big assignment on this one. And it doesn't, again, there's no time frame. This isn't school. But I want you to sit with this, because the more you do that, the more you start recognizing the territory and how easy it is to get into those dark corners. As we think about narcissistic abuse, every day, almost every day, we run into at least one narcissistic or toxic person. And if you have days you don't, those are the good days, right? But sometimes it might literally be a stranger in a store who's screaming and yelling at the clerk. Other days it might be a person you have to live with, and you might have to see them every day as a result. Some of these are people who are not in your day-to-day lives anymore, like a parent or a sibling, but their impact, their voice. And in the journal prompts, how did this shape you? For example, you might think my self-doubt comes from having been doubted my entire life. What are the harms that come from it? What did you learn? What kind of person, again, was it grandiose or vulnerable or whatever? How do you feel about this relationship? And have you grown past it? And then we're going to talk about barriers. a lot of what we're going to talk about today are barriers. This is just me sort of reviewing the kind of self-reflective work I want you to do. We're going to spend a minute getting on the same page, only a minute. Because if y'all don't know narcissism, I mean, I'm telling you now, I can almost guarantee you that you as an audience understand narcissism far better than a lot of people doing mental health work and a lot of people teaching psychology. I still run into people who are psychology professors, psychology instructors, and what they know about narcissism, it's nonsense. It's like what you would learn in sort of first grade about narcissism. Not that kids learn about it, but you know what I mean. All of you actually experience the multifaceted nuance of what this is. I am struck by how naive the people who write about this under the guise of research, how wrong they're still getting it. Narcissism, it's so tempting to say, it's just, they're just really superficial and vapid and they're really selfish. Sure. But that's like saying, I don't know, that's like saying a pizza is flour. Okay, you're missing a lot of the other stuff. Okay, well, here's all the rest of it, the cheese and the tomatoes and the onion and the pepperoni, because we know it's more, and it's this other subtle stuff. It's how they manipulate us with money. It's the role of shame. It's that deep insecurity. It's their victimized nature. That's the stuff that makes narcissism so hard. But this is the complex quilt. There you go. That's one thing I should get one day, is a quilt for my bed that has this as all the squares. Can you imagine? But this is the quilt. And it's really, really important that you understand that it is so complex and nuanced. You already know most of this. Most of you survived all of these patterns. I use the craved framework for no other reason than for you to have the tool to talk to other people about this. Put it in the chat. How many of you have had the experience of where you finally understood what was happening in your life? A spouse, a parent, a friend is narcissistic. And you say, you know what? You talk to someone else and say, I figured it out. Oh, my spouse, my partner they're a narcissist. And the pushback you got, like, well, you shouldn't be saying that. That's a clinical word. And well, that feels judgmental, right? All those shamey shame people. The reason I came up with this framework originally was for people who were having to intersect with family courts, attorneys, custody evaluators. Those people would immediately treat whatever parent was using the word narcissistic, often as the more difficult parent. And a lot of people would go into court having learned that their ex or their soon-to-be ex-partner is narcissistic, use the word, and find themselves on the receiving end of a really, really bad judgment. The craved framework is a way for you to think about it and use words to talk about narcissism in mixed company, family court, other legal proceedings, human resources, even family get-togethers, or talking about it with friends, and using words like high conflict or conflictual, really rigid and unchanging, antagonistic. Antagonistic is a juicy word because it captures all of it without getting people angry. Vulnerable. I should also throw in there victimized. Entitled, egocentric, dysregulated, and dismissive. Use this acronym, craved, to come up with the other words, to not have to say narcissism, but be able to talk about narcissism, especially in spaces where it's not safe to use the word. Why did you fall for them? And again, I know a lot of this is review for you, especially if you've attended my seminars. But again, I want us on the same page because some people in the program may not have attended those seminars. The C-suite, the charm, the charisma, the confidence, the credentials. They went to the right school. They have the right job. They drive the right car. Think of how many really bad dating books and dating sites will tell you things like, list the 100 things you want your partner to have, and then you'll manifest them. This is how many times how people manifest a narcissist, because a lot of that is sort of like credentially stuff. That credential stuff can really be what narcissistic people are so superficial. They're good at getting all of that stuff, right? They're curious initially, right? They're really, really good. I always call it the narcissist laser vision, at looking at you and saying, tell me everything about you. I need to know everything about you. And you're thinking, ooh, this is really alluring, especially if you had parents who never saw or heard you. But the problem is that intense focus, it's almost a little bit extra. And you want to keep an eye on that because it's as though it's too much. And that too muchness is very much the love bomb play. And then there's comfort. Comfort is that familiarity that's related to trauma bonding, right? That comfort of it feels familiar, but you're not saying to yourself, wow, this feels familiar, like my abusive father. I'm going to run with this. Mm-mm-mm. You feel it like a magic. You feel it like a connection, like an electricity. But unfortunately, this is a bad trick of the psyche. And that sense of comfort, like, gosh, it feels like we've met before in time and space. You have in your dysfunctional childhood, pelling for you. I might be the only person in the world who, when I meet a charismatic person, start to have a panic attack and have to excuse myself. So, I mean, it's just so we learn, and then going back to confidence too. We so value confidence because so many of us don't have it. So when we see someone who has it, we find it so alluring, like they must have it together if they're confident, rather than not understanding it. In some cases, not all, but in some cases, it's sort of the empty confidence. A quicksand. Okay. What's the quicksand? What keeps us stuck in all narcissistic relationships? Some combination of these things. Hope is the big one. I hope it's going to change. I hope it's going to get better. I have belief in human beings. Everyone has the capacity to change. La, 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 la. Hope. Guilt, especially when you're dealing with someone who's more of a vulnerable narcissistic person. But even with the grandiose and malignant narcissists, if you stare at them long enough, they look pathetic. So out of guilt and pity, people are like, this person, I feel so bad, just stepping away from them, even though it's clearly what they deserve. It keeps people stuck. Fear of being alone, fear that this is as good as it gets. Fear that the next person could be worse. Fear of how will you support yourself if you're worried about financial issues. Fear of whether you'll be ostracized by your friends, your family, or other people. That fear of if you leave a job with a narcissist, am I going to find another, or will it pay as well, or will have the same benefits? Fear is I think fear and hope to me are often the neck and neck winners on how people get stuck. Then there's love. Drop it in the chat. How many of you struggle with this idea that I kind of still love them? I do love them. Makes sense. Those of you who come from narcissistic families, you loved those parents who got it so wrong, because a child has to love their parents. It's an attachment need. Well, that love through the trauma bond can get to be a confused space. And we all know that the trauma bond is kept in place by that alternation between good and bad, right? And so that feels like love. Those good days feel like love. And those days that feel like love keep people stuck. Then what I've hoped to deal with is the last one on this list, is lack of information. People didn't know. Can't tell you how many clients who said to me, Doc, if I knew this 10 to 15 years ago, if even one shrink told me this wasn't going to change, I would have gotten out then. And nobody talks about this. That goes back to what I opened today with, is the mental health world isn't paying attention. This is what's more important. What does it do to you? This is, this. You all could write their prompts. The 7 areas that are affected in people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse, or what I call antagonistic relational stress when I talk to therapists. It affects how you think. It affects how you go through other human relationships. It affects what we call perception and arousal, like things like having flashbacks, nightmares, those sorts of things. It affects your sense of self-blame, self-doubt. It affects your emotions. It affects behaviors, the walking on eggshells we all do. And then it affects your health. Sit with this. Which of these areas are harder for you? Because as you go through this healing program, some of you might be saying, this is all about the cognitive for me. I cannot stop thinking. I cannot stop ruminating. I feel so helpless. But for others of you, it really may be the physical and health stuff. That's what this program is designed to do, is give you the infrastructure so you can actually start hitting this in a way that's meaningful to you. We've talked about all these areas before. I talk about it on the YouTube channel all the time. But again, I want to show it to you as a framework, because it's important for you to understand that all of you have experienced that in different ways. And you've been dimmed. Another acronym to keep with you. What happens to you in this relationship? All of the above. You're devalued, invalidated, minimized, not only by the narcissist, but by other people. How many times have you heard, oh, please stop making such a big deal out of it? Oh, you're being a baby. What are you talking about? That's minimization, which is really a form of gaslighting, which is the key tool of manipulation, the entitlement, and of course, the dismissiveness and the dysregulation. All of this is the sort of the core of what happens to you in the narcissistic relationship. So having this acronym again sometimes can help when you talk to other people about it, talk to therapists. But really what I want to get to and sort of the meat of today is I want you to really think on each of these areas. Because as we begin this journey, in a way, one thing I want to get out of the way are the barriers to it. As I was preparing today's program, I was envisioning it as though we were all going to be going on a trip together. Okay. But it was a trip that was going to be like, we're going to be doing like a lot of physical walking up through the mountains under changing conditions. That's what I was conceiving of. Thinking, what do I tell them to pack? But more importantly, what do I tell them to prepare for? Right? What are going to be the barriers? For some people, it might be altitude sickness. For other people, it might be not having the food they want. For other people, it might be how difficult the trails are, and it might be hard on their feet or their back or their legs. These are the barriers. And the more we can address some of this stuff up front, because they're not going to be the same for everyone, the more that you're going to be able to say, because what I don't want happening for you, because it's happened to you over and over again in the narcissistic relationship, is this idea of I can't, being told, no, you can't do this, or who do you think you are? Oh, really? You're going to heal past me? Oh, aren't you so great? All of that really contemptuous, dismissive, devaluing talk. So when people who are going through narcissistic abuse face barriers, one of the first things they do is they don't say, oh, I faced a barrier. You blame yourselves. You say, oh, this is me. Who did I think I was? Oh, please, who did I think I was going to get out of this relationship, right? I want us to lay the barriers out so you don't go there. So you recognize, oh, yeah, Dr. Ramani did say we were going to get headaches at altitude. She did say it was going to be cold at night. These are the things that are going to come up. And for you to know, all of this is normal. It doesn't mean you're not healing. It doesn't mean you're not making progress. This is normal. And that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit of how. We've talked about the trauma bond at length, right? I'm going to re-educate on this one because, like I said, I don't think you can learn about this enough, and some people may be new. The trauma bonding is this sense that you're incredibly close and connected and trust a person, even though it's an abusive relationship. So the person's in an abusive relationship, but there's a sense of feeling very connected and close. People who are trauma bonded always want to fix it. They always believe that there's something that can be done. And even the sense of, I want to go back to the beginning of this relationship. It was so good. I want the first 2 months back, or we did have some good days. And it's almost like you collect all the good days in a box as though they all happened at the same time and think you can go back to those days. The reason the trauma bond persists, it's almost like a workout. You go back and forth between seductive and good and affirmative and happy, and then abuse and invalidation. Seductive, invalidation, seductive, invalidation. That's the trauma bond. Oh, we had a good day. Yeah, great, great, great. Boom. And you're like, oh my God, good, good, good. And that alternation is that's the muscle. Okay. And trauma bonding, what it does is it leaves us confused. It really cements the cognitive dissonance. And what do we do? How do we keep the trauma bond? How does it stay in place? Justification. They didn't mean it. They had a hard day. They had a tough childhood. I'm being too sensitive. All that self-gaslighting comes into place. The pattern to reflect on, because everybody kind of plays the trauma bonded game a little bit differently. Obviously, the justification. Another is that hope fortification, as I call it. And the hope fortification comes out most pointedly when you believe the future faking. Well, they're in therapy and they're trying and they really didn't mean it. And maybe next holidays are going to be different. You believe the future faking. Okay. People who are trauma bonded keep having the same fights, keep having the same conflicts, keep having the same carousel. People in healthy relationships argue. They do. But they tend to argue about different things over time, right? They may argue about, I don't know, like, hey, you said we should have rented a car and we didn't. Then they resolve it. And then another argument down the line might be, I said we should have gotten this kind of a dishwasher. Like the argument evolves. Trauma bonded people, it's literally the same argument. In fact, drop in the chat if you've had that. Gosh, you're right. We just kept having the same argument. It doesn't matter if it's a romantic relationship, family relationship, just over and over again, always the same fight. And I guess the future fake is you believe this time it'll be different. The magical connection piece. And by that, I mean, and I've said this before, anytime I've talked to someone in a trauma bonded relationship and said, and who still doesn't even get it yet, and say, what do you love about this person? They'll say, I don't know. Well, it's just, I don't know. It's weird. It's like this, something like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, there's not, I mean, people in healthy relationships will say they're respectful and they're kind and they have my back. Like, it's like, they're on it. With healthy people, healthy relationships, badoom, badoom, badoom. But the trauma bond is this very much like, it's this sort of hazy thing because it can't be articulated because it's not healthy. And that's one reason to talk about it. And I want you to do that in some of your prompts. Like, yeah, I can't articulate what it was that was good about this. Trauma bonded folks are afraid of leaving, mostly because there's a fear of being wrong. What if I'm wrong? What if I leave and I'm wrong? That's a self future faking. Trauma bonded folks become the one-stop shop for their partner. They attempt to become indispensable. They are the shrink. They are the personal assistant. They're the best, or they try to be the best friend. They're the cheerleader. They're the parent. They're the housekeeper, the driver, you name it. The trauma bonded person becomes everything. And as a result, they get isolated from all other relationships because they're just typically only doing for the toxic person. In trauma bonded relationships, people hide their feelings, their hopes, their dreams, and most importantly, their needs, and they don't ask for any of them to be met. The person in the trauma bonded relationship almost tries to become invisible because that way there's a greater likelihood that the relationship will sort of stay on an even keel. Trauma bonded relationships are very much characterized by pity and guilt. A person wants to get out, but then those emotions always pull them back in. And in another trauma bonded pattern we see is rationalization. The person rationalizes the relationship to other people or they hide their problems. So despite the world falling apart in any relationship, narcissistic relationship you're having, when other people ask about it, you're like, oh, everything's great. Everything's really good. And not just because you think you'll be invalidated by those people, but because you almost want to say, I got to keep this secret because I want it to keep going. If you talk openly about how toxic the relationship is, it's conceivable people will say, you need to get out of that. And that can feel scary. If there are trauma bonded patterns you feel like I missed, please drop them in the chat because I actually want to hear about them. I don't ever purport to know everything. This is just what I've accumulated in the work I do, but you're the experts as well. And then share which of these have also been an issue for you. Let's talk about self-blame. This is a huge barrier, right? And this is how the narcissistic folks get away with it. Because by us blaming ourselves, they just get to keep doing bad things. We keep blaming ourselves. In a way, the self-blame is very much a manifestation of the indoctrination into gaslighting. In another way, the self-blame is a way, bizarrely, of managing the anxiety. Because what self-blame does is it gives us a sense of control. I did this, which means I can fix this, right? It's a pattern children learn in narcissistic family systems. They blame themselves. I'm the one who made mommy or daddy mad. I'm the one who made the mess. I'm the bad one. Well, what does that let the child do? Then the child can clean it up. Because the alternative, that the parent is a monster, is something just from an attachment perspective the child can't tolerate. So fast forward that into an adulthood. If the self-talk was consistently, this is my fault, then you can see how that becomes the absolute knee-jerk reaction. It can be big things or small things. Oh, I must have forgotten to give the information. I must have this. I must have that. I'm going to own it, folks. This is one of my biggest issues. And it almost is to the point where in me, it manifests as an almost obsessive compulsive pattern. I quadruple and quintuple check things to the level that I become really inefficient, quite frankly. So I know the profundity of self-blame, but the danger of self-blame is that people don't often get the help they need. They'll say, well, this was my fault. And unfortunately, many a therapist, not quite getting what this is, would climb on that self-blame train. Other people climb on that self-blame train in the way that they blame you. Did you try hard enough to communicate? Can't you give it a chance? Like, are you really being patient enough with this person? And what do you do then? Maybe I'm not being patient enough. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. If there's one cycle that is critically important that we address here, it's this. But I also want you to view it as, I want you to see how big a barrier this is for you, and try to think anytime you blame yourself, try to force yourself to see an alternative. Maybe it was the other person. Maybe I am just simply falling onto self-blame to protect myself. I really want you to think about what the alternative could be. Fear. Fear is a massive barrier to healing, okay? Because fear that if I actually start getting better, then how do I fit into these systems anymore? Fear, if I start healing, does that mean I have to get a divorce? Fear, if I start healing, does that mean I have to miss my sister's wedding? A lot of people think healing from narcissistic abuse means you've got to leave everyone in the dust. Not necessarily so. Again, I'm going to confess to all of you, I've had to go through some really rough yards in the last few months, and actually had to go no contact with so many people in 1 month. I didn't think it was possible to cut that many members of a family out in one fell swoop, but it was necessary. It should have happened a long time ago. I was afraid of doing that for decades. It took the near death of somebody for me to say, oh, hell no. And it was actually quite a beautiful day. I wish I kind of had a bottle of champagne where I just was like, block, 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 block. It took me decades. Why? The fear of being viewed as a bad guy. I am the bad guy now. In this system, I'm the worst person. But somehow the world didn't stop spinning. If anything, it's just made me a better teacher of this for all of you. So there was even a pay it forward. Fear stops us from wanting to heal. And so for all of you, you really have to think about, what are you afraid of? It's a bit like sort of jumping into the deep end of the pool. I'm not going to force you to jump into the deep end, but I'd like you to start on the shallow end, and we'll put on some floaties and get you to tiptoe into that deep end if that's what it takes. But the fear piece is huge. The anxiety is huge. And you know what? A lot of it is well considered. If you're dealing with custody issues or any of those issues where there could really be some grim outcomes, I understand it. But pay attention to where fear is stopping you, because a lot of it's an inside job. You setting a boundary in your head, nobody's being told that, right? You're not going up and say, hey, everybody, I'm setting boundaries, or please don't do that if you're thinking about it. Something you do. You can, like, I'm leaning into the camera now. I know it looks strange, but sometimes setting those boundaries is this. It's a subtle pulling back. Some people will notice it and start to bait you. A lot won't. But a lot of that fear is of the stuff that's here. That stuff you can manage by saying, okay, this is me doing this to me, and to really take that piece apart. That's going to be a lot of the big barrier for a lot of you. That relates to survivor guilt. If this is happening in any number of systems, especially in a family system, but sometimes in a workplace or a friend group system, you feel bad if you heal and you're leaving other people behind. It really can feel like you're leaving other people behind. You may have siblings that are not in on it. You might have, other people in your, even like, let's say you have adult children and you're dealing with a narcissistic spouse and some of them are still allied with the parent. You might still feel like, oh, I'm growing and I'm growing out of these people. You may say, I can't do it with this family anymore. And you're watching other people in the system still getting chronically abused by the narcissist. This is a huge barrier to healing. I understand that, because survivor guilt is what lots of times keeps people on the sinking ship. As you get stronger, if you so choose, you can actually be a voice for those folks. They will see you starting to grow. Now, listen, the enablers in the system, the flying monkeys in the system, they ain't going to throw you a parade for healing. but they were never on your side. They were never committed to your growth. The other people in the system who weren't ready to heal, but who aren't enablers, who may still be afraid, them watching you heal and grow is the greatest gift you could give them, because it shows them a sense of possibility. But this barrier is a very real one. People often, again, it's not just a trauma bond to another individual person. It's a trauma bond to a system. And that's where survivor guilt, and this really matters if culturally narcissistic abuse is an issue. You're from a culture where family first, it's very collectivistic. If you break ranks, the family's going to say, how dare you? How dare you try to step away from this family? And survivor guilt is even more potently felt in those systems. So to be aware of this dynamic and how it may be acting as a barrier for you. So I'm sure many of you have heard this statement of nature abhors a vacuum. What does it mean? That anytime nature senses empty space, it fills it up with fluid or whatever it does. It's this idea that nature, all things in nature that don't like a vacuum, we're not going to have that. And black holes remain one of those grand galactic mysteries we try to understand, because it does feel like this vacuum. But what happens? Everything just gets into this really interesting sort of inverted matter loop where the black hole almost becomes this compression of matter. Nature doesn't like those vacuums. And if we extend that to our lives, what gets really interesting is when we have been dealing with narcissistic abuse, especially from an early age, it has filled our brain. Think of your brain again as a real estate. The only way I can think of it is real estate. A lot of that real estate has been occupied with, am I doing it right? Am I pleasing the narcissist? What can I do to win them over? Why are they so mad? Like, think of how much time, space, and energy we devote to our toxic relationships. Well, then one day you better, because you're here in this program, you start to commit to healing and saying, I'm not doing this anymore. So you start getting better. What happens to all that real estate? Because now you're not ruminating as much. Now you're not thinking as much. And some people say, you're like, nah, what am I supposed to do? Like, oh, there's plenty you can be doing and thinking about. Because for those of you who've already made some steps on this healing journey, maybe not ruminating as much or going no contact with some people, you'll say, yeah, it gave me a lot of time. It gave me a lot of bandwidth. But that vacuum at first, like some people will say, yeah, I got past this narcissistic relationship and now there's this weird emptiness. That's that emptiness, the vacuum. I'd almost like you to view it as this big blank, empty canvas, blank slate that you can paint onto now. Don't be in a rush to fill it. The emptiness is okay. Because what I'd like you to fill it with is the stuff that actually authentically matters to you, not ruminating and wondering how you can please someone or win them over or keep them calm or try to avoid their rage. But the stuff that matters to you, or the stuff that matters in the relationships that are actually healthy in your life. But initially, when this happens to you, it can actually be scary. When I had been in my own therapy, when I was going through a narcissistically abusive relationship, I was having a lot of time distancing from the relationship. And my therapist said something. And when she first said it, I was kind of mad at her. But then it was actually one of the wisest things she'd ever said to me. She had said, sometimes I wonder if you are holding on to this relationship because it's already filled up so much of your brain. You're worried about what are you supposed to think about if you're not thinking about this. She said, it's as though you always need some chaos to occupy your mind. And I was like, what? Step off. Like, what are you talking about? But then I thought, she's right. Because since I was a kid, there was always this kind of chaos occupying my mind. When I finally was able to say, I have to tolerate those empty spaces in my head, almost right away, it started filling up actually with a lot of this work. And then now I don't even think about that person or a lot of these people anymore. Sometimes I do. I'm going through a rough patch, as many of you have been yourselves, but the rough patches will come. But then I got okay with some more of the empty space. And I want you to think about how much anxiety you have about having those empty spaces if you're not thinking about the narcissist. The enablers and the flying monkeys are a huge barrier to healing. Huge barrier to healing. I cannot underestimate this because they're not always narcissists. In fact, I'd say in about 80% of cases, these people aren't narcissists. They're weak. They're Pollyannas. They're naive. They're scared. They're immature. They're almost like it's as though they're indoctrinated into a cult. Kind of like, again, it's just like you can't break through, but they're dangerous. Because they're not narcissistic. It's not like, okay, this person's just toxic. You're like, there's a goodness there. However, they were willing to throw me under the bus to keep this family system going. They were willing to let me suffer and stay in this bad marriage because they just think marriage is so great, or they don't want to take a hard look at their own damn marriage. So keep in mind that these folks who may not be narcissistic, because you don't think they're toxic and their opinions matter to you, their opinions can be really, really problematic. And so people will say, I was this close, but then I heard their voice, and they often know exactly how to ping off the guilt you already have. Maybe it's not the right time. Oh, what if my mother gets sick? What if my aunt this? What if the new job that? I shouldn't quit a job without having another job. And people are just on you. And then when you throw the flying monkeys in there, who actually are really designed to sort of embolden the agenda of the narcissist, you got to know who these players are. And again, as part of your journal prompting work, you're going to see, I'm going to ask you, who are the enablers? Who are these enablers who are around you? Make a list of them and be aware of them. I'm not telling you need to get rid of them. Some of your enablers are actually your friends, but they need to be on a need-to-know basis. They don't need to know all that's going on. Sometimes they can't handle it. It's only a very sacred inner core in your life that has the right to hear about your difficult relationships. So keep in mind that this is a potential barrier to healing. If they're co-occurring mental and physical health issues people have can be a barrier too. Some of you may also be managing co-occurring anxiety disorders, mood disorders, eating disorders, substance use disorders, you name it. And those issues can sometimes magnify the self-blame, right? Well, maybe these relationships don't work because I'm so anxious. I'm guessing some of the anxiety came from being in this relationship. And if you're anxious, you're anxious. That is not permission for someone to abuse you. I am really sick and tired of people hearing that. Well, if you weren't so anxious, you're going through something. That is not an invitation for someone to be dysregulated and rageful at you. These co-occurring mental health and physical issues can make it harder to cope, can leave people engaging in self-blame and self-doubt. Well, maybe I'm the one who's the problem. It magnifies the gaslighting because the narcissistic person will say, really? Well, you're the one who's the this or the that, and will launch accusatory things at you around your mental or physical health issues. Your physical health issues can sometimes, many people will struggle with guilt. Well, I haven't been on my game. I can't do this or that, may feel limited, or just may simply not feel you have the bandwidth to engage in healing because you're managing physical health, you're managing mental health. The only thing I can tell you is that committing to healing is going to pay dividends in these spaces. It may mean that you feel like you have to approach this a little bit more slowly, that managing these other co-occurring health conditions is going to take time. That's fine. This is not a race. It's not about who finishes first or fastest. It's about program unfolds. Then there's this. Oh my goodness. The pressure to forgive. Gotta forgive. To forgive is divine. Everybody forgives. Why can't you forgive him? What's wrong with you? God wants you to forgive. The angels want you to forgive. Everybody wants you to forgive. I am telling you, and I'm just one human being. There's nothing special about me. But I never, ever want you to feel a pressure to forgive in this program. If you go to your grave not having forgiven, that's okay. This idea of forgiveness, I'm pretty convinced at some level, it was partly designed by the narcissistic folks so they could keep getting away with stuff and people would feel pressured to forgive them and then feel shamed if they don't forgive them. Forgiveness, when it's done right with a healthy person, is a magnificent experience because the healthy person says, What a blessing. I screwed up. This person forgave me. I will forever commit to changing my behavior and being aware and present and mindful so I never make this kind of mistake again. That's where it works. With a narcissist, it's I'm off the hook. Great. And if I do it again, they're going to forgive me again. Piece of cake. So they take your gift and they completely co-opt it. Some of you may forgive, and that's fine too. I don't view the forgiveness as a virtue. I view the forgiveness as a process, and it's different for everyone. So I'm not going to give anyone a standing ovation if they forgave. I am also not going to ever tell someone, well, you'll get there. Maybe you will, maybe you don't. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't forgiven all the narcissists in my life. I can tell you that right now. And I don't know that I ever will forgive some of them. And so, and that's okay. I'm not on a vindictive rant. I'm not going to go harm them. And they also don't hold any more space in my brain. I just don't forgive them because they turned my life in a way that held me back and hurt other people in my life. It's not okay. There's no forgiveness there. So I gave myself permission to distance myself from them, but I ain't giving them forgiveness. And that agenda, that pressure, it really holds people back from healing. They're saying, if I can't heal, then I'm a bad person. At least in this forum, in this world, in this healing program, I can promise you this. I don't care if you forgive. I do not believe people who forgive are better people than those who don't. I think we're all the same in that. I think it's a personal process. So to alleviate some of that pressure so you can actually do the work of healing, forgiveness to me is not a part of the process of healing. Hoovering and engagement, big barrier to healing. Why? Because during the course of this healing program, heck, maybe even in the past month or in the next month, some of you are going to get hoovered back. Some of you are going to keep engaging and maybe over-engaging with the narcissist. The one-word texts become longer texts, become maybe a phone call. And many times when people are hoovered or over-engaged with the narcissist, especially if they've set some boundaries with them, they feel ashamed. This is a shame-free space. If you get hoovered, this is exactly the space you need to be in because it happens to all of us. There are lapses. It happens. That's the nature of trauma bonds. It's the nature of being a human being. It's the nature of all of this. This is a community where you can turn to and say, yeah, I got pulled back in. And where you hear, you better hear on the community platform, I'll yell, is that it's okay. It happens. It happens. Let's break it down. What can you do to unhoover yourself or not get too pulled back into the trauma bond or set better boundaries on the engagement? Some people, there's something actually from the old alcohol abuse, alcohol use research called the abstinence violation effect. And the abstinence violation effect would happen when a person was sober and then they'd fall off the wagon and they'd have a drink and they'd slip and have one drink. And they said, well, I'm off the wagon now. And then they'd finish the whole bottle, right? The idea is that if I've slipped a little, well, I might as well go all in. And we don't need to do that. You might slip a little and say, well, I'm in now. So I might, no, you had a lapse. It happens. And maybe even figure out what was it? What were the triggers? What was happening that made me vulnerable to this? Sometimes it's the idea, well, I've gone in a little, so I might as well go all in. Nah, you went in a little. You can pull back. You can pull back the boundaries. All of us slip if we're trying to watch what we eat. We have the candy bar. You don't need to go and then eat 10 candy bars the next day. You had the one. You can maybe not eat as much sugar for the next few days. It's fine. So I want there to be monitoring of this. And I don't want any of you thinking, well, I shouldn't show up to this healing program anymore because I got hoovered or I re-engaged. That this is exactly where you should be if that's happening, to at least have a safe space to keep learning the skills. Reminders, they're everywhere. The street corner you drive by where you had the argument, or the restaurant you're even afraid to get takeout from because you were humiliated at the back table, or the grocery store you don't want to go to because you might run into that person. Reminders aren't always places. They can be dates, an anniversary date of a divorce, or the anniversary date of the day you found out somebody was having an affair, or the anniversary date of the day that you had the big blowout with your family, or the anniversary date of the day you might have had that your narcissistic boss abruptly let you go. Whatever it is, the reminders are everywhere. And I gotta tell you, folks, social media has made this 1,000 times worse. You ever get those notifications like, last year at this time, you were And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the worst thing for survivors of narcissistic abuse. You've come a year, and the last thing you need to see is some damn picture of you looking happy on a vacation, knowing how awful that vacation actually really was. If you can turn off those notifications, I highly recommend you do. But the reminders are everywhere, and people feel they're a barrier to healing. Instead of a barrier, we can harness them. They can go into journaling. Today's the day I did this anniversary date of me learning about their affair and contacting an attorney. So at that point, think about it, write about or reflect on how much healing you've done since that day, what you've learned about yourself. I would say that restaurant where you got into an argument at the back table, take a bunch of friends and have a fun time. Make a lot of noise and laugh loudly. Take the restaurant back. Take the street corner back. That sounded a lot worse than it really meant to be. You know what I mean? Take the spaces back. Take the dates back. That anniversary date, you found out about their affair, turn it into a party. Have a bunch of friends over. I don't know, make all the foods that person hated, but just do something to say, I am taking these days, these reminders back and turning them into something else. But they are a barrier. So be aware of them, because sometimes healing will feel harder than others. I want you to have realistic expectations of what healing can be. No, by next month, you're not going to be rumination free. Some of you may be, and good, that's great, but you're not going to be rumination free and immediately now falling in love with someone else, or have completely figured out who you are, what you're about, and be free of self-blame. I'm looking at you not just as a psychologist who studied this academically and clinically for decades, but I'm looking at you as a survivor. And when I tell you there is not a day or a damned hour I am not dealing with this stuff every day, every day. Some days it's a lot easier than others, but I'll tell you, on today's Saturday, Thursday, I had a literal meltdown because of this stuff. It happens. And I thought to myself, I'm going to tell this group, because it happens this deep into the game, because the triggers are the triggers. And I am not so arrogant as to think I've got my nervous system figured out. And then there's entire weeks I'm like, really good, it's fine, I'm good. But there's not a day, somehow it's not coming into me, whether it's self-doubt or self-blame or questioning myself for a second. The question is to make the voice in my life louder. I'm devoting my life to teaching about people about narcissistic abuse and helping them heal, and teaching therapists how to do this work. That voice needs to be louder than the Ramani, you're no good. Ramani, they're going to figure it out. Ramani, you're an imposter. I've got to make those voices quieter than these. Most days I succeed. But if I said to myself, I've got to live in that spotless mind where I never say those things, I would have thought, well, then I failed at this. There's no failing at healing. Okay. But keep those expectations realistic. And when the ghosts of the past trickle in, just let them trickle back out, because you're going to start getting more and more resistant to them, but they still sometimes might come in and really scare you, and it's going to happen. So I want you to have realistic expectations for do on the daily, but there's no schedule here. There's no by this date that. There's no deadlines. Let this be the one place in your life. There's none of that. The minute you do that, you set yourself up for one more place. You could be disappointed in yourself. It will happen as it happens. I'm hoping you do see shifts by doing this work regularly. And any of you who've been in therapy know that there are times you're like up, 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 and then stressors come and it kind of comes down a little bit. So don't put yourself on a schedule. That's why I'm not a fan of saying, originally we had conceived of this as a 12-month program, and my team and I sat around and said, let's not put a clock on this, because then people are going to say, hey, it's November and I'm not there yet. So I thought, no, this is a forever process. And for as long as you might say in 6 months, I'm good and I can go, great, wonderful. But your 6 months might be someone else's, 18 months might be someone else's year. There is no schedule here. And it's almost like saying, I'm going to be healthy for a year, then I'm going to stop. Well, that's not how health works. And it's certainly not how healing works. So don't get yourself on a deadline schedule. And then ask yourself personally, where do you want to go with this? All of you have different goals. Some of you might say, I actually want to get into an intimate relationship again. Others of you say, I never want to be in an intimate relationship again, but I really want to be more financially independent. Other people will say, I need to find something else to be family because I've walked away from my own family of origin. Every one of you is headed into slightly different directions. Some of you are going into different kinds of directions. Some of you might say, I work in a really narcissistic industry. I want out. I want to train in something else. these pictures are odd. And it was mostly I was putting it together and PowerPoint was sort of forcing me. So I was like, forget it. Small, medium, and large goals. What are yours? Small goals may be today I'm going to remember to do my journal prompt. A medium goal may be that you say, okay, within 3 months, I'm going to, I don't know, have sought out therapy, or I'm going to start a few steps towards a whatever, a larger goal, maybe going back to school or something like that. And the large goals are big. They may be, I'm going to get my degree. It may be that I am going to maybe try a little side gig of starting my own business. It may very well be that you say, I'm going to take my first trip by myself and I'm going to do a weekend away. But these small, medium, and large goals help because they work in lockstep. And I'd like you to start keeping track of those for yourself, because the small goals actually can be quite rewarding. My kids used to play a game where you'd have to collect like 10 bananas to get one palm tree. And then if you got certain palm trees, you won the game. The small goals are the bananas that you're collecting for the palm trees to ultimately to get onto those bigger goals. Some of you may not even have those larger goals. So yeah, I'm not trying to do anything bigger here than to get through the days without blaming myself. As far as I'm concerned, that's a very big goal in and of itself, which is great. But you divide these up as you want. Some of you might say, I'm really in this for smaller stuff. Some of you might feel different. And there is no agenda. Whether you decide to stay in this relationship or not, that's on you. I don't feel that it's somebody stays. It's harder to heal for sure, but it is what it is. It may also be that you want to be near your kids and you don't want to share custody of them. So staying, it feels like a real hybrid space, but we can work with that. Some of you may want to go. That carries its own issues. Some of you simply want to learn. You're not staying. You're like, I'm not changing a thing about my life, Dr. R. I just want to learn. There's the agenda. I want you all to heal, but let's not think that healing is the end of this. It's also growing. I want you to push back and push out on what your potential is. Narcissistic abuse limits everybody who experiences it. Everybody. So in all of you, there is an unwritten poem, an unwritten book, an unpainted picture, an unbuilt house, an unbaked cake, whatever it is, it's in all of you. Each of you needs to figure out the program. I hope it's been helpful wherever you're evolving along. And again, keep track of your growth, because in a way it's frustrating to plant a seed. For the first week, 2 weeks, you're staring at it, but then all of a sudden the seed pops. That's how actually I grow grass I have an indoor cat. I grow grass for her. So I plant the seeds every month. And then just as those little pieces of grass come out, like, oh, that feels really good. Right. And then a little while later, she's able to eat it. But it's the same thing. Right now, for some of you, might feel like I just put the seed in the ground and I just feel like I'm looking at a pile of dirt. You are. And what's about to come out of that pile of dirt, let me tell you, it's going to be pretty extraordinary. So welcome. I hope that this was informative, helpful, giving a really long way to your healing. Thank you again.